Life certainly is different now. But one thing hasn't changed, and that's no matter who you are, education has the power to bring out your potential, to propel you forward, no matter your background, where you are from, or what you want to achieve. At NBCC, we're still committed to hands-on learning and instructor-led education, whether that's in person or virtually through connected classrooms. Just remember, education knows no boundaries, and neither should you.
Well, good morning, everyone. Bon matin à tous. My name is John Wishart. I'm the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Moncton. Welcome to this morning's Breakfast and Learn, Atelier de matin, presented by the Chamber. You know, I was thinking this morning, perhaps for the immediate future, we should change the name of the series to Please Get Your Own Breakfast and Learn, because of COVID-19, we can't really gather at NBCC and serve you a breakfast, but we hope to get back to that sometime soon. We've been delivering a lot of our events, obviously, online for the past year, but you know, pandemic and vaccine rollout dependent, we hope to get back live before the end of the year. I'd like to once again thank our series sponsor, NBCC, for being our partner here, and we really appreciate their support. We have a great turnout this morning, about 40 participants, which I think is a reflection of the interest in today's topic. And our audience today includes developers and builders, lenders, landlords, and municipal reps. Now, COVID-19 has had an immense impact on our lives in many ways, and the state and future of the commercial real estate market is among those. Vacancy rate in Greater Moncton was low heading into the pandemic, but what has the last year done to the market? With so many people working from home and some of the big players telling us that they will keep a portion of their workforce working remotely post-pandemic, what does that mean to commercial space and to commercial lease prices? We're very pleased today to have with us Bill Hennessey, one of the main players in the commercial real estate market in New Brunswick, to help us answer some of these questions and provide some clarity as we look forward to 2021 and beyond. Bill is the Managing Director of Colliers International New Brunswick, the CEO of Platinum Atlantic Realty, and the President of 55 Queen Developments. He's been an active member of the Greater Moncton business community for more than 30 years, arriving in Moncton in 1986, when he accepted a position as an auditor with Atlantic Lotto, and that was a tidbit I did not know about Bill. Over the next 2 decades, he was a senior executive and part owner in companies involved in the gaming industry, including something called Spilo, before turning his attention to the real estate industry in 2013 when he launched Platinum Atlantic. He was approached by Colliers in 2017 to represent the global company here in New Brunswick. And I think we all know Bill was the driving force between 55 Queen, which has become a landmark in the continued rejuvenation of downtown Moncton. Somehow he still finds time for philanthropy and volunteering, and his efforts are being the second vice chairperson of the Friends of the Moncton Hospital, member of the Capital Campaign for Crossroads for Women, director of Capital Campaign for the Crosman Community Center, and he's also a member of #InBecca's Name, which has raised money in Becca Schofield's name to help cancer patients and their families with financial challenges. And I would be remiss if I failed to mention that Bill is also now on the board of directors of the Chamber. So before I turn the floor over to him, I would encourage everyone to please post your questions at any time during the presentation using the chat function at the bottom of the Zoom screen. We hope to have as many questions and a lively Q&A at the end of the hour. So with that, Bill, the floor is now yours.
Great, thank you, John. Well, good morning, everyone. As John had mentioned, my name is Bill Hennessey, and I do wear many hats when it comes to commercial real estate. And what I'm hoping to do this morning is to bring you some perspective based on the views I've had from those wearing those different hats. As business owners, as employees and the like, one thing we all have in common, we all have addresses in commercial real estate, whether we're an owner operator, whether we're a landlord, whether we are a tenant and the like. We all have a bit to play in this particular space, and it all touches our business in some way, shape, or form. No doubt 2020, you know, it almost gets to a point where we're kind of repeating, but it has been a challenging year. There's absolutely no doubt. My goal this morning is to look at what has happened in 2020 try to dissect it, make some observations based on what I've seen, and offer some forward-looking content or comments as to what I see going forward. From a business point of view, when I find that the times are uncertain, I'm a bit of a data geek. I like to dig into the data. So what you're going to see today is, as I look at each of the sectors, I'm going to look at the data first, try to see what the data means, and then make some comment as to what the forward-looking market will look like. So I'm going to check. I just want to confirm with Xavier that you've got the PowerPoint, the opening slide available, because if you do, then I'm going to start moving through. So from an agenda point of view, what I want to do with everybody this morning is to look at each of the four sectors. We have, when it comes to commercial real estate, there's four kind of pillars in our community here in Southeast New Brunswick. We've got office, we've got industrial warehouse, we've got retail being a big part of our market, and of course, multi-unit res. So in looking at those four sectors, I'm going to try to see what they mean and try to comment as to what we see going forward. Fantastic. So as I started to mention, the opening comments I've gone through, I can look at each of the sectors and look at what we can see going forward. Oh, I thought we'd start by welcoming to 2020. We all sat here about 12 months ago, genuinely excited. We're on a bit of a tear in Southeast New Brunswick. And then this global thing started to creep into our neighborhood. One thing I've figured out in this process is that we are so used to change happening so rapidly, we tend to forget all of the big pieces that occurred. And to kind of get everybody reset back into March of 2020 when the news first started coming out, Steve Gallagher, who owns the Old Triangle here in downtown Moncton, of course, one of his busiest days of the year is St. Patrick's Day, and with the likelihood that that may not be able to happen due to the looming pandemic, he very quickly used the famous word of 2020, pivoted, and was one of the early people to do it and announced that his St. Patrick's Day celebration was going to be on May 17th. When I heard this, I thought, brilliant, good for you, Steve. You figured out how to move quickly and the like, and I was looking forward to participating in the events of May 17th. When we look back now, 12 months later, we realize how naive I think we all were when it came to decision making in terms of what we were going to do to manage and kind of move as to deal with the looming pandemic that was coming. So what have we seen for the last 12 months? As John had mentioned, work from home. I'm going to try to comment on whether this was a fun social experiment or what we see to be permanent on a go-forward basis. All of the landlords and tenants alike are dealing with the question of office space. Do I need more because I need social distancing? Do I need less because everybody's working from home and I got less in-office employees? Do I see a hybrid model, in which case I'm going to be paying for a desk in an office building that an employee will use 2 days a week, but yet I'm going to be paying for it 31 days a month. Does that make sense? Are there other options out there? What does it all look like? Downtown, of course, we're in downtown. We're invested in downtown. We've seen the effect on restaurants. We've seen the effect on coffee shops. So I'd like to speak on a go-forward basis to what I see there. What's up with all the apartment building cranes? I've talked to many people in this sector, and there's a big portion of the camp that says we're in great shape. There's another big portion that says we're overbuilding and we're driving ourselves back up to 10% vacancy rates again. So I'd like to try to dig into that and see what I think really it looks like. And in the middle of all of this, MID in the industrial space had a record year in 2020 in the middle of a global pandemic. How is that? Why is that and the like? So let me start by trying to tell the story with the facts. February 3rd of 2021, I read the headline from Huddle, and this has been happening an awful lot throughout the last 12 months. There are headlines screaming commentaries, and if you get into what the real story is, the facts sometimes can be different. So let me read you the quote. It's a tale of contrast for commercial real estate in Greater Moncton. While vacancy rates increased in the office sector, the industrial sector is booming. So basically a tale of two commentaries, one going up and one going down. We jump into the office sector. Just give me a second. Let's deal with the facts. So our office inventory in Greater Moncton is a little over 3.5 million square feet. Our December vacancy rate, as recorded by Turner Drake and announced back in December, was 12.84. If we compare that to 2019, our vacancy rate was 7.96%. So overall, there was an increase of 4.4 in real numbers, and from a percentage point of view, about a 61% increase. So conclusion, the sky is falling. What that does is it causes a fair bit of tremor through. If you're a landlord, you're worried about vacancy. If you're a tenant, you're thinking, oh, maybe there's an opportunity to renegotiate a lease. Maybe I can crank down my monthly or my net rent values. Maybe I can get some TI, maybe I can threaten to leave. If you're a bank, you're getting a little nervous about financing office buildings and the like. So what I do, the Turner Drake data, I buy the actual data. I don't necessarily want to read the reports, and I kind of mine through the data and see what it's really telling us. And just to give you a kind of a high level view of what the mining through looks like. In 2020, we had 2 new properties. Heritage brought Moncton High to the table and brought CBC. So that brought our inventory up by 154,300 square feet. So in a market of 3.5 million, that's a big number. If you take that and park it on the side and do what I'd call an apples to apples comparison, the real vacancy rate, if I could use that word, is 8.85, and it shows an increase of 0.89. I know that's not that exciting to put on the title of a news article, but that's what I see to be the real story. And if you dig in even further, Class A vacancy rate has a vacancy of only 3.2%. From an observations point of view, I think the real vacancy rate is relatively unchanged year over year, and is not, depending on you're a half full, half empty, we've either not seen the effect of the pandemic or we're actually surviving the pandemic relatively well. As far as people coming back to the office, that process has been slow. On a forward-looking point of view, and again, I can't tell you what Apple stock is going to be in a year from now, so I'll kind of structure these comments in the same context. What I do see happening, and I see it coming in other markets outside Greater Moncton, tenants' needs are changing. They're a little bit more nervous. They realize that things can happen very quickly. Typically, our commercial leases questions are, do you want 5 or 10 years? What's the net rent? What's the TI? And what other operating expenses can I expect the landlord versus the tenant? That's been the conversation. The leases are 40 pages long, and you can write them on a Post-it note. If you look at what the tenants are looking for, I think we're going to see changes in duration. We're going to see requests for 3 years, 7 years. The 5 and 10 model may not work, may not be one size fits all for our tenants going forward. There's also going to be a desire for flexibility. So yeah, I'll sign up for 5 years if that's what you really insist, but I want to hard out after 3 years. Can you live with that, yes or no? So I do think there's going to be some adapting. The other area I see coming is a degree of finish of our office spaces. Tenants are going to be expecting pretty much, or they're going to move pretty much toward turnkey. Not going to want to spend money on bricks and mortar. They're going to, or on drywall and door handles. They're going to put it into their business. And I have started to see this happen in central Canada. The office building is shifting. The view of it is more like a hotel model. So if I want, as we all know, to rent a hotel room, I can rent it for a day, a week, and a month, and I walk in there with everything I need to work or to sleep, and everything else is already there. So start reimagining that, or start looking at the office building with a lot more flexibility in terms of the time I need to rent it, degree of finish, and the like. So I see that coming down and trickling into our market. The other view is reimagining office work. So if I work at Tangerine, I'm told my address is 1234 Main. I work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday are my office hours. And by the way, I got on-site parking. So I'm all good. That's the story in 2017, 18, 19. What I'm starting to see happen is that where I work is based more on function rather than time. So function means if I have quiet, repetitive work, I literally can do it from anywhere. I can do it from home. I can do it in the office. However, if I have client meetings, if I want to do a team brainstorm session, if I'm dealing with human resource issues, then I'm going to spend time in the office. So, the word that tends to get banged around is hybrid. I think the proper way, the kind of more specific way to look at it is function, and space will get dictated by function rather than time. all of the articles I've read about employees working from home versus working in the offices, the one common theme is that we all want social interaction. We want it because we need it because of who we are as people. We want it because we've come to realize that great ideas come from interacting, whether it's at the water cooler or whatnot. I know in our organization, we've had many, I can directly connect social interaction in the office with transactions because somebody may not think to email or text, but upon discovering something that's happening, we end up with a transaction happening. So I do see that overall we'll see more employees coming back. Moving on to the industrial space, Huddle was correct. The industrial space is a great space here in Greater Moncton. We've got about 3.1 million square feet of industrial. Our vacancy rate in 2020 was 11.49, which was down from 13.24 in 2019. So we've had a decrease of 1.79 or about 13%, which is fantastic. The industrial space is spread across 6 industrial parks in Greater Moncton. And as I mentioned in my opening remarks, MID in 2020 sold 90 acres of land for a value of 4.3 million. And in a typical year, an average year, they sell about 35 acres for about 1.7 million. So clearly there's a lot of interest in the industrial space. Where's it all coming from? As I mentioned, it's a hot sector. Of course, hot is driven by demand. We've seen from our kind of corner of the world, if you will, demand for industrial. We have e-commerce and the supporting logistics drifting in. And e-commerce, of course, you need warehouses in order to deliver to home. So we spoke to many different tenants looking for logistics to help with the e-commerce deliveries. And by the nature of our geographic location, we've been blessed. We are the best logistical city in the Maritimes. So as a result, we're going to see our industrial space continue to grow and develop. What's interesting, which I think is good for us here locally, is that the space is dominated by local companies. We've got a lot of multi-generational companies that have the bulk of the industrial space. So good news for the industrial sector is good news for our local companies, which is fantastic. On a forward-looking basis, I see the increase in demand is going to drive new construction. And again, if you look at the facts, that's not a difficult leap because those 90 acres weren't purchased for land banking, they were purchased for development. So I see that continuing to unfold. I do believe just some tool stories, we will have more of them. I think for those of you, I think most of us already know, Jessam operated in Aurelia, had about 40,000 square feet, needed to grow and expand, needed about 80,000, start looking further afield. And the net result is they ended up buying some land here in Moncton, I think on the Brise, hiring a local contractor to build them an 80,000 square foot property. And they're in the process of hiring 50 people. So that's all good news. So when you listen to Jessam, they'll say, well, it wasn't a difficult choice. Moncton is a very inexpensive place to live. Moncton offers some freedom when it comes to access to amenities, whether it's beaches and the like. Your staff can have a great life here. And we have that other layer that just emerged in the last 12 months, which is we are considered a quote unquote safe place to live. So I do anticipate we'll see more on the Jessam tool side. Overall, I think the price per square foot industrial has been pretty steady, almost unmoving in the last 4 or 5 years. So I do think we'll start to see a slow and steady increase in the price per square foot. Retail side, we've got, retail is a little less studied, yet it is a big part of our sector here in Greater Moncton. So I took a different tact on this side. We've got about 63 active retail space listings out there now, whether it's ourselves or some of the other commercial brokerages. There's about 271,000 square feet of retail on the market today. It's either listed for sale or lease. If I hadn't done this last year, I could have told you what the change was, and I will be in a position next year to tell you because we're measuring it. What I can say about retail is retail continues to grow. October was 54 billion, nationally. And clearly that was the biggest year upon record. And from November of 2019 to 2020, there's a 7.3% increase. So people are spending money at an increasing rate. The growth, no question, has been led, and this won't be a surprise, motor vehicles, sporting goods, hobby and music stores, furniture and home furnishings, any of the building materials, gardening, basically all the DIY side of it. People are at home and they're spending money at home. I've been watching the retail space from a price per square foot, excuse me, and there's been no change. So the good news and the bad news is there's no change. It hasn't gone up, but it also hasn't gone down. our first-hand experience, there still is interest from an investment point of view on retail strips or retail pads. We've traded the highest volume of them we've ever traded in 2020. So reports of retail is anything but dead. From an observations point of view, 1/3 of companies, and I got this from the Southeast Recovery Team survey, 1/3 of companies have gone online and increased their presence since in the last 12 months. The change, I would suggest, is inevitable, but it's occurred at a breakneck speed, which frankly, I think is positive. I think it's important that we all have an online presence. So when I look at what I think will be around here in the next couple of years, I think going forward, we need successful companies will have e-commerce and bricks and mortar. That seems to be the key that's working. And if you look around at some of the companies that are doing well today, they have both covered. And again, by the nature of geography, we are by default a shopping tourism destination. So I don't anticipate that will change. And work I was doing recently with Costco, they've got about 16% of their memberships who are not residents of New Brunswick. So that by default will tell us we are a shopping tourism destination. Let's chat about multi-unit res. Boys, this sector has been on fire in the last 12 months. Again, let's step back and take a look at the facts. The facts are we've got about 13,349 doors or units currently in inventory in Greater Moncton. Since 2019, the increase in units have been 697 doors, which represents about a 5.5% increase. Our vacancy rate in October of 2020 was 2.8%, and this represented a jump of 0.6. Our vacancy rate in 2019 was 2.2. So, canary in the coal mine or just normal adjustment. Our average rents, anybody who follows the transcript or the like, this has been a very significant topic recently about rent increases. The average rent in 2020 is $896 a door. The average rent in 2019 is $831 a door. So it's about a 7.8% increase, far and away from the stuff that I'm reading in the transcript about 40 and 50% rent hikes. It's gotten to the point that temperatures reached the political level with the opposition calling for rent controls. And I think the province recently announced a 90-day look into, if you will, into the space. So I'm hoping and trusting that when you get into the actual facts of the situation, a 7.8% rent increase is pretty much a normal rent increase when you look at overall costs of running and owning these properties. The asset class from a sale point of view has been very active in 2020. There's been over $100 million worth of assets that have traded hands in Greater Moncton here. So basically, apartment buildings have changed owners to the tune of 100 million plus. If we look into building permits, just Moncton itself had 91 million building permits in 2020. There's 11 new buildings that are kind of at various stages of construction right now. So that's going to bring to market another 728 units. So pretty much consistent with what, despite the fact that we run around and see all the cranes, and I personally think it's fantastic. I love to see development. It's not that much different than what we saw in 2020 in terms of new units coming to market. If we look at further afield, on February 24th or next week, there was some coverage recently. The Planning Advisory Committee is going to be looking at a very exciting project called St. Bernard Square. If I recall, it's about 148 doors and it'll be located next to our property in downtown Moncton here at 5.5. Beautiful looking property. And also in that same meeting, they'll be discussing some variances for a property by Ashford Living on Highfield and Sangster, which is their second property, of course, the one that they've already got going, which was in the news also in 2020. They've also got that property, they've announced the second one. So what does all that mean? Depending on who you talk to, we've either overbuilt and we're running to 10% or we're on par or the like. So I tend to, again, kind of take a step back and take a look. What we've been seeing, and prior to the pandemic coming, immigration was identified as key for growth of Southeast New Brunswick. I'd say growth of New Brunswick. In particular, I don't mind apologizing for this. We are the economic hub of the province, so we do anticipate immigration coming in. We've been enjoying about 2,800 people moving into Southeast New Brunswick a year for the last number of years, and I don't anticipate that slowing down. So from a demand side, you've got immigration, which those people need to live somewhere, and often they start in apartments. And the other thing that's been happening in kind of parallel to our commercial real estate space, of course, is the residential real estate market is very much on fire. Average home sales by the local Greater Moncton Real Estate Board numbers published in January showed about a $250,000 sale price for average homes. Well, I've lived here for a while. If you had to tell me 5 years ago, I would have told you $250,000 is a lot to spend on a house, and now it's considered the average. What's driving prices? Again, looking at the numbers, there's currently a low inventory of homes available. The development side hasn't caught up to the demand side as of yet. So the average inventory of what's currently listed is at an all-time low, which by default is driving up prices. So what does that mean for multi-unit res? When you drive up prices of homes, apartments become a more viable and attractive option, which no shocker, it's like this in most other cities. So from the demand side, I think multi-unit res is good. From the supply side, the development side, we've got low interest rates, historical low interest rates, which of course always help with cash flow definition for these projects. And we've also got low vacancy rates, and even a 2.8 vacancy rate 6 or 7 years ago, we would have considered that almost unattainable. Vacancy rates on the buildings and apartments are a little like offices. When you dig into the numbers, you can look at a new property, those 600 plus doors coming on stream, and they get compared to the total inventory in the space, 13,000 units. Well, the real comparison is any building built in the last 10 years, because you're not going to go from a 40-year-old building to a brand new building. The real comparison is what's been built, say, since 2010 onwards. And if you look at that versus new construction, your vacancy rate actually gets closer to the 2% number. So for the most part, it's been relatively unchanged. Another trend happening in our space, which helps on the development side, is cap rates are dropping. Cap rates have always lagged behind when it comes to apartment sales. We've always lagged behind Halifax, and we started looking at comparables. We also operate our Colliers in St. John's, Newfoundland, and if I look at comparables in Halifax and St. John's, our cap rates are getting to a point where those markets are, so that bodes well for development. Forward looking, I think the fundamentals are good. I think, again, dealing with the facts, it looks good. What I enjoy about the particular sector is if I want to buy a house, the bank looks at me and my ability to pay regardless of the house I'm buying. If I want to do an apartment building, the banks will look at the project to pay for itself. So there is almost an inherent handbrake into development that it needs the fundamentals need to be in place before banks will finance. And of course that's based more on science. So I think based on that, I think forward looking, the sector is in good shape and will continue to grow. There are some, and there's some out there that I chat with that are predicting that the vacancy rate in 2021, when we look at this again next year, will actually be lower than 2020, despite all the new construction. So we shall see. Overall, that's what I see on multi-unit res. To kind of wrap up my comments, I'm a bit of a Benjamin Tal junkie. I've been listening to him for the last 4 years. He's the Deputy Chief Economist with CIBC. What Benjamin Tal does, he takes very complex economic modeling and explains it into layman's terms, which makes it great. What's equally impressive is he's right more than he's wrong. He did a presentation in December of 2020, and I wanted to read you a quote. The last half of 2021 will see the economy take off. There is a pent-up capital waiting to be deployed, $90 billion of in excess personal deposits and $80 billion in business deposits, plus low interest rates, which is the powder keg we will see to see the economy take off. So that's his view of the world in the latter part of this year on a go-forward basis. What I've looked at in terms of what I think we can expect. One comforting thing to note is the office getting that was being predicted back in April of 2020 has not occurred. The half full group will tell you that we haven't felt the effect yet. The half empty and the half full is saying actually we're doing pretty good. I have seen a lot of situations where often tenants are delaying any lease decisions, kind of holding a holding pattern until after the vaccination happens in 2021, and we get to see how all of this shakes out. So I do see that going forward. No doubt in retail, there will be some rebalancing. There will be winners and there will be losers. The e-commerce and storefront combination, I'm predicting, will be the one that wins today. And this is not a hard leap. There will be new industrial construction on those 90 acres bought at MID. People didn't buy them to land bank, they bought them for development. Also going forward, there's no doubt we had a taste of the Atlantic bubble, and it was very beneficial for us here in Southeast New Brunswick. Traffic between here and Halifax picked up. Traffic around the province worked well. Traffic in PEI. That certainly helped. And, back 10 days ago, there was discussion about it reoccurring in April, but the sideways turn that Newfoundland took here in the last week, I suggest that's probably pushed back for now. But clearly, I'm looking forward to seeing that opening up. Not so much for the rest of Canada, and certainly not so much for our relationship with the US for now. So I think that's the kind of the pin I'm putting my hopes on, is the Atlantic bubble get reopened. I think on the multi-unit res space, one thing I have seen, which has been very interesting, yes, we've had growth in inventory, yes, we've had growth in demand, but there is a shift. If you look at downtown Moncton, if you look at downtown Dieppe, if you look at the town of Riverview, there are a number of projects slated for development in the downtown. So I do see a shift from current pretty much domination by commercial to a higher balance of residential versus commercial for the downtowns, which I think bodes extremely well for the restaurants and for the coffee shops. The challenge, of course, is always, what do you do after 5 o'clock when the office workers go home? So more residential will cause, I think, a new breath of life to be put into our downtown cores. And I, as part of that Southeast New Brunswick survey or study that was done with the Economic Recovery Task Force, they surveyed business leaders and said, despite everything that's going on, what's your point of view? And surprisingly, 84% of the business leaders were were optimistic. Sorry, your choice was optimistic, very, and then down the scale, if you will. So a full 84% were optimistic in terms of the next 5 years. And I also share that optimism. Again, when I look at the fundamentals, I look at the numbers, and I look at the go forward, I do share that optimism as well. So on behalf of the Chamber, I think these events are great, and John and his team for keeping us in the business community well informed. I want to thank you for getting up early and not having your breakfast, as John had commented on. I think we're going to turn it over for a Q&A, but before I do that, I would just mention, if anybody wants to take any offline comments, feel free to give me a call or reach out via email at bill.hennessey@colliers.com. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Bill. That was a great overview of not just the commercial sector, but retail, industrial, multi-res, and a great way to start the day. I just jotted down about half a dozen questions myself, but I really would love to hear from the audience. So please post your questions in the chat, and we will get to them as soon as we can. Just to start off, Bill, you mentioned obviously multi-res in 2020, and again, this year is on fire, but we did see a decrease in the number of commercial construction building permits in 2020. Do you think that's a trend for the next year or two, or will we start to see an uptick?
I think what happened in 2020, to kind of put commercial construction and development in context, there was a bit of a hit pause and a wait and see approach. What drives commercial development to a large extent are tenants, are commercial leases. And I think until we all know what the shakeout of the pandemic is going to be, I think that projects that were on the books or on the horizon likely haven't gone away. What I'm hearing is that I may not do it in 2020. I haven't shelved it, or haven't crushed it. I've shelved it, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we all look like once we all get vaccinated. So, it's a bit of a tide as we get more immigration coming in, as we get, the business community starting to grow and develop, then there is a need for commercial development. So my comment to your question is it's more of a pause rather than an actual stand down, if you will.
Okay, great. Okay, we've got a comment coming in here. Just hold on. Somebody has asked, do you see access to building materials driving up costs, lumber, steel, etc.? We've seen the price of lumber triple since the beginning of the pandemic.
No question about it. 2x4s at the local Home Depot and Home Hardware have gone up significantly. I was working with a developer recently. Price of steel from when they originally envisioned the project have gone up. I've heard numbers 30–40%. That's a bit of the supply chain issue that's a result of the pandemic. Is you just literally, the demand is there, but the supply is not. I do see that as a bump. I don't see it as a permanent state. We are all capitalists at heart, And as the demand picks up, the supply has been slow to react. But I do see that as we roll out over the next 6 to probably 9 months, the supply will catch up with the demand. And in doing that, I'm hoping we'll see more normalized costing for development projects.
You mentioned, Bill, flexibility in terms of how commercial space is used. We've started to see the introduction in this market of co-working spaces. Do you see more of that trend coming forward as opposed to somebody renting a certain space for 5-10 years?
No question. I think that is going to be part of the solution going forward. And there's a couple of different models that are out there. Some of them are here, which is you can, as a small, medium-sized business, rent a kind of cohabitate and share common area costs like boardrooms, receptions, photocopiers, and the like. So I do see that continuing. I also see another model emerging, which is more like, or coming east, which is more like the Regis model. And in fact, we've got a great success story here in New Brunswick called U Station out of St. John. So it's more of a membership. So basically I pay X amount per month and I can pop into any of these offices and instantly get on their Wi-Fi, print if I need to. I can even use them as mailing addresses and the like. So I do know that you're going to see more. I do see, and I know because of some of the conversations I've had, you're going to see more of that coming in to kind of fill that void between, am I either at my office or am I at my home? Those flex spaces I do see to be an emerging trend for sure.
Okay. I've got a question here on interest rates, Bill. Some banks are saying we may start to see them rise. Others are forecasting down. The Bank of Canada, of course, has kept the key rate, very low. Where do you see the trend happening in the next 12 to 24 months?
That's pretty much like asking me what Apple stock is going to be in 12 months, but I will take a stab at it, qualifying my answer by saying absolutely I am not, and I'm sure there's banking representatives on this call that are more equipped to respond. My opinion is that I don't see a whole lot of upward pressure. We have got ourselves into a situation where, when it comes to federal government and the like, there's been a big spend. And how do we crawl back out of that? I don't think it serves anybody's interest to crank up rates and slow down development, because that's ultimately what will happen. So what I anticipate happening, I don't see over the next 2 or 3 years much of a shift upward in interest rates. I really don't want to comment on anything kind of post 24 or 36 months.
Yeah. The crystal ball is not that clear coming out of the pandemic. No,
absolutely not. Johnny Carson, I think, was at Swami. I need Johnny Carson Swami hat in order to respond to that properly.
That's right. Yeah, bring back Johnny. There's a question here. Somebody mentioned that that the trend is residential on top of ground floor commercial is beginning to be a trend. Do you see commercial ready spaces being set up perhaps on floors 2 or 3? More of a trend that way?
Absolutely. It kind of comes into the category of supply and demand. I am familiar with projects outside of Greater Moncton that the first 3 floors will be all office. We certainly see that if we look at Halifax. You get into the resi side of it, typically is on floors 5 and above. And it's a great use of space. The decision as to the amount of office you'll need, whether you do the 2nd or 3rd floor, will likely to be dependent on location. If you are in the downtown area, it makes a ton of sense. If you look at the inventory of product that's available in terms of office space, and you do your calculations and you see that the demand is going to be there, and you could actually win some tenants over, then you should. If you're trying to do it in a kind of more of a tertiary or secondary area outside of the downtown cores, then the banks are probably going to give you a head scratching on it, because they're going to want to see leases in place before they're going to be comfortable signing off on the overall project. So the short answer is yes, depending on location.
Okay. Going to ask you a political question, Bill. Sorry, but I'll preface it by mentioning, you referenced rent controls or rent caps. The province's 90-day look. I saw some data the other day that showed, despite the increase in average rents in Moncton in the last year, our average rents are still lower than Halifax, St. John's, Charlottetown, and Fredericton. In the region, only St. John, New Brunswick is lower than us among the major cities. So maybe it's more of a recalibrating to where we should be, quote unquote, in terms of rents. But what do you think a rent cap would do to the multi-res market?
I'll comment on your first. I do agree with you that we are just catching up. What we see as tremendous growth or tremendous increases is actually not, 7% is not a big number. And I do see we're catching up to the other urban markets. I think a rent cap is an absolutely horrendous idea. And I'll try to be as polite as I can. Having that interject into the market to try to stymie growth into the market, the net result of that is in any place, and this is not new to our market, any place that's been tried, the results have not been good. The market has to shake itself out. And what we tend to forget is all of those new buildings that are coming on stream, there's a natural migration. So you move from a 40-year-old building to a 20, and ultimately as you evolve in your career and your financial status and the like, you'll move into the newer properties. That leaves the older properties there. The thought process is maybe they stay the same, maybe the rents drop and the like. But bringing in a rent cap to that, and of course my other second favorite topic is putting a rent cap in and then double taxing the property. You're basically going to throw cold water on development. When you do that, your general contractors, all your sub trades, all of the employees that will work on those construction sites, you're throwing cold water over all of that. And from a again, as political as I can be, or unpolitical, I think it's just an absolutely terrible idea.
A question just popped into the chat about your thoughts on the double property tax, and I think we probably know what the answer is. But
I will comment on it because I do believe that there was, the current government indicated a willingness and then kind of stood down. I do believe if you get in again into the facts, if you were able to demonstrate that a kind of a slow reversal over 5 years, basically paring it down from what it is to getting it to where it is in every other economy here in North America, that probably by year 3, the fear is you're giving up money from a province. Probably by year 3, you're going to see that the incremental development that will result likely will not only backfill, it will give you an increased amount of revenue coming out of that sector. And then you've got years 4 or 5, and then the ensuing, decades to benefit from that. So I'd like to see somebody sit down and actually map that out, because I do think that is what needs to be done in order for everybody to look at, again, the facts and not kind of debate the emotion of it.
Right. Next question, Bill. The member of the audience starts off by saying your analysis of the Turner-Drake data is spot on. And then he asks, could you comment on government subsidy programs? Are real estate companies, property owners taking advantage? Are they meeting the needs of the real estate industry? Are there remaining gaps which should be looked at?
That's a toughie. I can kind of look at what happened in 2020. Anybody, and this is not unique to real estate, the wage subsidy, I'm sure small and large employers would have benefited from that. The probably the biggest hiccup in the real estate sector was the original rent relief program that was kind of handed or kind of asked by landlords to administer. That resulted in nothing but confusion and frustration for both landlords and tenants. And I'm encouraged to see that that was tweaked, if you will, to get it more tenant focused and less landlord focused and less, to be simple, less confusing. In terms of other subsidies, I'm not a big fan, quite honestly, and I'll talk about the double taxation because I think it's wrong. But in terms of the subsidy side, I don't see that there's anything else that kind of needs to be done. I think we're in pretty good shape overall. And again, I don't want to, because I always get nervous talking like this because there are people that are having some very big difficulties throughout this process. But the general comment I'd make is no, I don't see that there's any gaps that the feds or the province have missed when it comes to relief programs.
I'd like to ask a question about retail. You mentioned, bricks and mortar retail is far from dead, and we may see some sort of hybrid of more online, which we certainly saw last year with bricks and mortar. You look at a place like CF Champlain, do you see big retail developments like that moving to more of a mixed use model? And maybe we started to see that with the TD Center there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what has happened in other sectors, and one of the, the good news and the bad news in Greater Moncton is, we can get a glimpse of the future by traveling further afield and taking a look at some other sectors. And that multi-use model is starting to kind of take hold. And it's, if you look at the TD or Champlain, that's a good example of it. But I think it'll get more kind of more value driven as you move forward. So you'll have people living on property. You'll have a ton more professional services because malls, for the most part, are conveniently located. So you'll get not just the retail, the clothing store model, if you will, but more professional services. TD is a true office, and they're there, and I trust if you talk to them, they'll tell you they're very satisfied. But I do think that's what's starting to come. And I know I've been chatting with some of my colleagues across the country that are working with some of the larger retail nodes, and that's what they're looking at. They're doing redevelopment plans based on, and to me, that's exciting. In some respects, I used to call them the barns. The barns had all the stalls, and we all walked down the stalls. Somewhat kind of boring, if you will. If you look at retail that's evolving, experience retail seems to be where it's at. You walk into an Apple store, your experience is totally different than if you walk into the Source or Best Buy. If you walk into a Tesla, it's totally different. So I see more of those coming on the retail side, and I do see that multi-purpose developments taking place. And quite frankly, I think that's exciting stuff.
Mm-hmm. Bill, I know your company is involved in leasing probably the largest retail project right now in the Granite Center.
Yep.
Is there still quite a bit of appetite for space there? Do you see progress continuing in 2021?
Yeah, absolutely. I won't let the cat out of the bag too much on the development side, but we've seen a new building that's gone up. There's another one that'll be breaking ground here probably within the next month, and there's another one that's on the horizon. So the interest has continued to be there. That's retail site. If you look at, again, what's happening further afield, retail nodes are getting located next to highways with great access. So you've got your draw from the city and your draw from the highways. So that the location of that node has been working very, very well. On the demand side, we get inquiries weekly in terms of tenants there. We've got some that are imminent that I'm looking forward to being able to announce. And if you look at a street called Granite Drive that didn't exist 4 years ago, it's one of the busiest streets in Moncton today. So I think that all bodes well for retail development.
Yeah, you and I both live in the Elmwood Drive area, so we know what traffic's been like in the last year. Thanks for that, Bill.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Okay. One more question here. You mentioned the multi-res vacancy rate, 2.8% in 2020. Is there a sweet spot in terms of where vacancy rate should be to still spur construction, but allow enough access for tenants?
I've started to model it out, and I've talked to some of the financial people that I interact with quite regularly to try to get it modeled out. My opinion, without having done the work that needs to get done, is I'd put it into 4 to 5% space. So what that means is you literally could double the vacancy rate and still have very viable projects. The amount you spend on finishing the projects, you may tweak. Cost per door, you may adjust depending on the vacancy rate, because that will get factored into your financing model. But I do think there's plenty of headroom available with the vacancy rate before we're going to see the handbrake starting to be pulled on many of these or some of these projects.
Okay. I don't see any other questions popping up, so unless there is, I'll close things off. I just want to thank you, Bill, and Colliers for presenting today on the current and future state of not only the commercial real estate market, but really development in general. This is a topic I know certainly at the Chamber we could talk about every day. I will say that some of my colleagues in the region are envious of Greater Moncton's resiliency and continued growth despite the pandemic. They look at building permit numbers and multi-res construction starts and wonder what's going on here, what's in the water. So anyway, thanks for joining us. I think this is a topic that we're going to continue to revisit for the rest of the year. Our next Breakfast and Learn will be later in March, featuring Matt Sims of Simplicity Designs, and the topic's going to be the experiential economy. Where will retail need to move in the future? So it's a good follow-up to what we've heard today about retailers connecting with their customers. And I should also mention, if you haven't signed up yet for our Recovery Road Economic Recovery Summit, it's next week on February 25th. Encourage you to do so. It's a virtual half-day summit featuring some terrific guest speakers, including Frank McKenna, Melanie Joly, who's the Federal Minister of Economic Development, and some senior executives from Google, along with some breakout sessions on sectors that have been particularly hit by the pandemic, like retail, restaurants, and tourism and hospitality. It's a sort of a la carte thing, so you can sign up and attend the sessions that are of most interest to you. You don't need to stay for the entire half day. Registration for that and all our events are online at our website, ccgm.ca. With that, I will say bye for now. Merci. Thanks again, Bill, and everybody have a great day.